Good morning, everyone. How's it going?
Howdy.
Howdy.
We have a very special episode planned for you guys today. As you can see, we're back with Steve, myself, Bethany Barsoian, and we also have a guest on today, John Shomby. And John has come on to talk with us a little bit about his recent article that he wrote for Radio Inc. called "It's Time for Radio to Be is it totally or completely? Totally unreasonable, right, John?
Yes.
Totally, completely. And when I first read this article, I just knew that, first of all, it was very well written. But I didn't know much about you, John. So I did a little bit of background research and obviously found out that you have a very long and illustrious career in radio. And now you're writing as well. So I definitely wanted to have you on the blog, and we've brought Steve on as well. I know Steve and John are familiar with each other from your career in radio as well, Steve, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But yeah, I'm really excited to have you on, John. You're like our first industry guest that we've brought on. So definitely a good selection. And I just wanted to ask you could you give us a little bit of background about how you got started in radio and sort of where you are right now?
Okay. Graduate of Penn State University, majored in communications there, which meant absolutely nothing back in those days. That and 25 cents at that time got me a cup of coffee. But I wound up working in a small market just outside of my hometown of Philadelphia, and then moved to South Georgia, became a program director there, and stayed a program director for a bunch of years. Programmed in Birmingham, New Orleans, Portland, Dallas twice, Boston. Then moved into being an operations manager in Augusta, Georgia, Flint, Michigan, Kalamazoo, and then Norfolk, Virginia Beach for 13 years, and then moved here in 2016 and have been in Nashville for 9 years. Had worked for Cumulus for 4 years, running a bunch of syndicated shows on a radio station. Now I'm in business myself the past 5 years, doing some talent coaching, working with a syndicated show, and coaching some artists before they go out to radio.
So you know a little bit about radio, it sounds like. You've
Just
been
a
in
little bit.
for a minute, yeah. And so, Steve, just can you give for our listeners that don't know you as well, can you give a little bit about your background too? Because you're going to see a little, obviously, I know on the programming side. Give us a little bit of background how you got started in radio, and obviously where you are now.
Well, John's a Nittany Lion. I'm a Terp. So, yeah, I know. And like you, John, I got the communications degree. Actually, mine was radio, television, film, and speech communications. And that's plus. But like you, I started off a little small radio station outside of DC and did the talent thing for a while, and then became a PD in Cincinnati, Boston, back to DC, Detroit, and then came back here and started working with these guys about 10, 12 years ago.
So same as John, you've been around not too long, but you know a little bit about radio, and so I think you guys are perfect to have on together. Thank you guys so much both for sharing about your backgrounds. Steve writes a bunch of our blogs, and if you guys check out our website, the Hot Topics, you'll see all the blogs he's written and also some of the videos that we've recorded. Steve and I have had some good conversations about those topics. But John, what inspired you to write this particular article? It's time for radio to be totally unreasonable. I have a few guesses, but I want to hear it sort of from you. What was the initial inspiration?
Well, a lot of my inspiration, believe it or not, comes from the messages I get at church. And this was a Sunday guest speaker who I love. It's a guy who works with John Maxwell, who's a big-time leadership speaker and an author. And he was talking about being unreasonable in faith and things like that. And he used this book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Yep. And he told a story about a couple who went into this restaurant, and it was one of the top restaurants in the world, and it was in New York. And the last thing a person asked them as they finished their meal is, what in your stay in New York, what is the one thing you missed? Well, missed getting a street hot dog. He sends his people out to get 2 street hot dogs for the 2 people, brings them in, serves them on plates with all the fixings and all of that. and just blew those people away. And it was kind of what this man, Will Gardera, who was the author, built this restaurant based on being unreasonable. It
Yeah.
all started back when they wanted to be they were a top restaurant, but they wanted to be number one in the world. And this was the way to get there. And that's kind of what built their reputation. And I really got drawn to the unreasonable part because I thought it was something that really paralleled radio really well, because we're good at that when we do it. When we do things that we go that extra mile, when we do the extra for listeners, and we do the extra for our staff, whatever it may be, it's one of those things that just hit me. And I thought, well, you know what? This is something I would love to recommend that people read this. So, and that was it.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of like thinking outside the box, but even more than that, right? Like over the top, being able to, meet people at a place where they like, oh, they would never be able to do that, but then you're actually doing it and even exceeding it, right? Is that sort of what you're
Absolutely.
thinking of? Yeah.
I mean, there was tons of. I mean, I'll tell one more story in the book. There was a couple who had planned to go to Tahiti for their honeymoon, and because of weather, the entire trip was canceled. And they went there and he found out they were coming there for dinner because it was going to be the dinner before they left. He
Okay.
decided to get one specific room, and they made it into a beach. They put sand in there, they put umbrellas in there,
Everything.
they changed the menu to fit where they were going. And it was just one of those memorable experiences for the people. And it's just one of those things that, people wouldn't do. And this guy basically he hires a group of people to do that for his restaurant. And it just made me want to reach out to radio and say, hey, this doesn't take hiring extra people. It takes the people you have inside and just a little bit extra time, which we don't have a lot of, but we have a lot of creativity because we're in the
Creativity. That's the word I was going to say. It takes a lot of, and radio has been being creative, for a long time.
That's
So
our
it's like you said,
wheelhouse.
they've got it.
That's
Yeah.
it. So it just really struck me, and then I talked about Delta Airlines, what was going on there, what they're doing with their trying to get people to advertise. They're advertising their the way they're doing things is a little differently than other people. I mean, just I'm looking at some of the others that are doing the same thing, and it tells me that radio, we could lead in that area. So that was just the whole reason for the article.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Steve, I want to ask you this question. I'll also ask John. Obviously, you read the article as well. Steve also contributes a lot of articles for Radio Inc. And
Good one.
he's very entertaining to read. Did you think that? Were you surprised that John would write an article like this, as far as what's going on right now in the industry and some of the challenges that radio is experiencing?
No, I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but I mean, what John is saying is it's about culture, right? And any company's culture starts from the top. It starts from within. So if you're going to use the radio example, what comes out of the speakers is what's going on behind the walls and inside the walls, right? Radio is fun, radio is entertainment, radio is exciting, and if you have that kind of vibe in the wall inside the building, it's going to come out, and it's encouraging people to break things and make mistakes and be creative and all those kinds of things. I guess my when I was reading that, I was going, this is a great idea, but I worry that radio stations don't have people in the building anymore. John and I are old, so we remember when we had full staffs, right? We had to worry about who's covering the overnight shift on Sunday morning. That doesn't happen anymore. So that collaboration, you have a voice tracker. So how are you collaborating with people like that? And we've gotten used to being on Zoom, but that person to person being next to each other communication, there's something lost. And I don't know how radio stations can capture that, but it is a leadership thing. To John's point, it's a leadership thing. It's whoever's running the show, you've got to start there and then have it all trickle down.
Yeah. What do you think, John?
Well, I absolutely agree. It starts. I mean, I'm fortunate. When I worked in Virginia Beach, and Steve, you know who my boss was there for the latter part of my time there, Dave Paulus. Dave and I are best friends now, and the culture that I never heard the word culture inside a building till he joined. I still have the 5 cards that he gave us all to live by each day. And I think the fact that we had such a open, wide, and communicative culture there, we did things. I mean, we were in 2015. Our digital department billed $1 million in 2015. Okay, tells you how far ahead we were, and I think culture had a lot to do with that. And that's what Steve is saying. And I agree with the fact that there aren't enough people to do it. But I, one of the things going on at the NAB right now is the discussion about how you do that. And I think I just read it. I mean, I had to refer to another article. Fred Jacobs wrote something this morning that was pinpoint, right on, spot on, about how we have to stop playing small ball and look at the big picture and start thinking about, developing the farm team again, getting people ready for the talent ready, and building inside the radio station. I want to say this, and it probably is going to fly in the face of what's going on in radio now. But why do we need regional VPs of programming? Why do we need national VPs of programming? Why don't we get that money and put it into the local radio station or the local properties and develop what's inside of there? Because that's what's more important. It's great to have somebody who's overseeing everything, but I think it's much better to have someone overseeing, one radio station or 5 radio stations and have a group inside. And it
boots on the ground, right there, right there.
Yeah. Boots on the ground. So yeah, that's
Well. It's also too about a matter of making mistakes, right?
absolutely.
The problem with the PPM, when PPM came along, and I remember my first when it was still Arbitron, and they showed me I forget what the M score thing, the media base, I think it was, and they showed me a station in another market where the meters all went down when the break started. Well, when you listen to the audio, the break was lame. I mean, of course it went down, but that created this whole culture of let's eliminate negatives, let's strip everything away that could tune somebody out, and keep it as clean as possible, and that led to boredom, and that's the problem. I mean, I'm always amazed by how much people talk about podcasts and how the younger generations flock to podcasts. Podcasts are spoken word content.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. And it's something we've taken off of music radio to a large measure. And I think that's the challenge. That gets back to John's point, right? The more we can do to serve the customer, and what does the customer want? They want connection, they want emotion, they want to be involved with something.
Yeah, and when you look at the Gen Z audience, which is the audience we're going to have to start looking at as radio grows, that is what they look for. They're about connection. They're about finding something, finding a cause to work with, etc., and give them something. But it's funny, Steve, that I think I laughed about this when PPM came out, and then after a while, everybody said, "Well, it's all about the talent." And I thought, well, wait a minute. When I got into radio, it was all about the talent. It's always been about the talent.
That's it.
You say it as if it was? This is a revelation. It's not a revelation. It's always been about the talent. We just have to. Everybody gets nervous about ratings, and I think that's one of the biggest issues. I've seen more stations make decisions based on, and you, Steve, have seen probably hundreds, where they make a decision based on a number that comes back that was disappointing, and they thought, well, this morning show is not happening. We need to replace it, and then don't understand why that morning show didn't work because the last one did. And I think there's some things that you have to look at. It takes a while. I mean, it does take a long time for things to develop in our business, and we don't have the patience anymore. I could keep going about this, but it's just a fact. I think radio. I think what we do in radio now, and this being unreasonable part of it, told me that we still have people inside that can do this.
Yeah.
Can create things to draw people in, because that's what our job is. That's what we're in this business for. We're not in this business to see what the M score is. We're not in this business to see if we can get our queuing to grow. We want as many people to listen. My job was get as many people to listen as possible. What happens to to translate into ratings, then well, so be it. But that's the job. Get as many people to listen.
John, have you seen this thing where a lot of the radio stations are doing their own, like the morning shows are doing their own like podcasts now? Because that's happening here. I'm from Providence and I used to work for the Cumulus cluster, and the morning show there, they started that when I was still with them several years ago. And I think it's been helpful, to get the listeners more engaged. And so they listen to them in the morning show, and then they also listen to the podcast. I'm not really sure. Is that something a lot of other is that happening with other radio stations too, or are people leaning into that?
I think it's happening with radio stations, but some are just checking the box. Like they're going to do a podcast, and they're wasting a lot of time doing a podcast when they could pick something out of a morning show that could be repurposed and really be a much more compelling podcast in that respect.
Yeah, for the content of what they're talking about.
It's good to have your content available to your listeners in various shapes and forms. I mean, let's face it. How many you don't watch? I mean, I'm a big fan of Reacher, okay,
yep.
and I didn't watch Reacher. I watched seven of the 8 episodes all at once.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go week to week to week
because
I knew when it would be available, and that's it. And I think that's the plus. We have a better shot at doing that because we're so immediate. We can have something available right away, and I think that's. But yeah, podcasts are important, but it's not to check a box. It's to make sure you have that compelling content there too. It has to be. It was something that's rolling around in my head now because, like over the weekend, like last Friday, I'm driving in. I don't know how many times I yell at the radio when I'm driving into town. Steve, you understand.
Yeah.
But I heard a national morning show put a listener on the air, caller on the air, and all they talked about was how they met him. And that was the break. And he talked about a bunch of inside stuff about where they were at this remote and that remote or whatever. And they went away. And I thought, what was the reason for this? And when I was driving into town Saturday, when we had the tornado warning, radio station I was listening to had the EAS alert, and then they had their voice tracker, who I know is in another market, talking about what's going to happen tomorrow in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And all of Nashville metropolitan area was under a tornado warning. Okay, I had to go to TV audio, and that was how we figured out our way to find a safe place to go. And it really made me upset in the sense that there are 2 areas right there that could have been 2 breaks, literal breaks that could have been used for something compelling, something informative, something entertaining, and we threw them away.
Yeah. This reminds me, Steve, of a lot of you've written, so you wrote that article about how local are we? It's one of the, John was just touching on a lot of those points that you brought up in the article. Do you want to just share your story about when you were listening to, it's very similar to what John was saying?
Well, I mean, just to dovetail with what John is saying, I mean, there's an immediacy effect there, right? When I need you, are you there for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we have to train. I mean, I think we wrote about that at one point where, you have to train the listener, especially in information stations, that, you may not always need us, but when you do, we're there, that kind of thing, right?
Reliability.
And for example, they didn't have it happen. I mean, my quick example was, I live in a small town and it's 2 groups and one of them is all voice tracked and they had their national service on, and I'm standing in the store and the midday jock goes, "Hey, if you're with me in Cleveland today, the Rockets are playing the Cavs tonight." Okay, well, I'm not with you in Cleveland. And even if I was, I don't really care that the Rockets are playing the Cavs tonight. And then she went on some long thing about why I should follow her on social media. And I'm like, why? What did you give me? What did you do for me? I think I have an article coming out about this, but a long time ago, and John, you may remember who made the quote. It may have been Randy Michaels. I can't remember who it was. But when we first started going to these voice track things, there was a comment made that no one cares where David Letterman comes from. And that's true if you're delivering David Letterman level content, right? Right. No one cared where Stern was. No one cared where Rush was.
Right.
Because they delivered high level content on a regular basis. So the idea of, well, the voice tracker that's coming into my market, do they sound better, more professional, more major market than the local guys here? Yeah, they do. But when there's a forest fire in Shenandoah National Park, they ain't talking about it.
Well, I'll give you an example of what happened on Like 5 years ago, we had a major tornado rip through Nashville, all the way through the northern part of Nashville into a suburb called Mount Juliet, and in that area. And the TV stations were caught literally with their pants down. They and what's happened since then is interesting because radio does not respond like this. But since then, whenever there is a tornado warning, they break into local programming. They break into programming and they're on until the warning goes away. They say it. All the three networks, the local stations, excuse me, say it here. Matter of fact, we had one anchor that was on, excuse me, from Thursday or Wednesday night from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 7:30 Thursday morning, straight through.
Wow.
Her husband's the guy named Joe Breezy. He's a guy who's been on the air here for a long time. I know them pretty well, and I texted him. I said, whatever she was on, I want it. But it was
some of that
responding to what people, and then they've run promos that basically have listeners telling the weather person, "You saved my life."
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that in radio. We just don't take the time. We want to check the boxes off, but we don't take the time. We're wasting our time. And understand, I think we're wasting our time on the 3-minute rule and things like that, and not understanding the bigger picture of how do we get people just to listen.
Yeah, that is really what the goal of it all is.
Right, and I think that it goes back to your example for the regional guys about empowering people. I mean, what we do as research directors, we analyze ratings and we tell stations what happened. We don't tell them why it happened because we don't know why it happened. Right. I mean, I always used to say that we test our music, we play the best songs ever. Well, even there are times when my most favorite song comes on the radio and I'm on the mood. And it doesn't mean that what you did was wrong. So it goes, and I think this kind of goes back to your original point. It's creating this brand, if you will, that is consistent, that delivers, that gives me something every time I turn it on, every time, and it gives me a reason to want to come back more because they're feeling some emotional need, and that starts from your whole thing of doing amazing customer service. I mean, let's face it, in the general world, good customer service is kind of a lost art. We've all could relay our experiences to that, and to the point where when you have a great customer service experience, you're like, wow, that was amazing. Yeah. I mean, think of Costco, right? Do you ever have a bad experience when you go to Costco? No, you don't, because that company.
Trader Joe's.
Every time you walk in, the people are amazing. My mom is in a rehab facility right now, and she's been there for a couple of weeks. Everybody I have encountered in that rehab facility when I go in there is amazingly friendly. Even people that are not working with her. It could be the cleaning crew, it could be somebody that bumped into an elevator. They're just, hey, how you doing today? How's it go?
Yeah.
And I am absolutely blown away by it.
It makes a difference. And like you said, Steve, you will remember that for a long time because it's not as it's more common to have the bad experience than it is to have the good.
This restaurant that Will Gardera was manager of and owner of is one of the most expensive restaurants in New York and in the country, but they have a waiting list to get in because of their reputation for service. Mm-hmm. So price doesn't matter to people, and all they want is to be seen, to be felt, to be heard, to know that you care enough about them to entertain them or to inform them or whatever. And I think that's one of the lost arts. There are shows that do this. Trust me, there are shows that do this and do it well. But it's when I hear those things, those little things that don't happen, I'm a believer in every break must count. You mustn't not, I don't care about that you're number one for today's country or the today's best variety. All I want to know, if there's a tornado coming, what do I need to do? Or if if it's flooding in near my neighborhood, where am I going to go? Or if there's a big, if the Titans are having in a playoff game, how can I get tickets? Whatever, but be something that give them something that they can take home with them, that they can hold on to.
Yeah, the hardest thing I always found, and it's true for any consumer-facing business, but you need to put your mind into the mindset of the end user, right? What's in it for them? Whether it's the restaurant or it's the radio station, what's in it for them, not for us. It's what's in it for them, and it's a hard space to be in, but it's I think a necessary one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think particularly with the younger generation, right? We're talking about, I guess, I mean, I'm a millennial, but then, the Gen Zs, we know that if you don't impress them really quickly, they're gone, right? The attention span is like nothing. So having something that's creative, having something that's fresh all the time and being able to, reel them in with that and to keep them there is not easy, but it's necessary.
Well, there's small things. I mean, what would what listener would be honored to be a guest inside the radio station for 2 or 3 hours, to get a tour of the station, to see things, to get some of the radio station swag and all of that? It's an experience. It's something to feel. And they'll walk out and they'll tell 10 of their friends. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's lost. The little things we can do that don't cost money. That's where, I mean, him going out and buying those hot dogs cost them what, $10, but bringing back in and putting them on silverware and giving them to those people on the house and all of that, that was an experience that will bring them back, and they'll spend $150 on dinner.
Does this play in with John, with sponsorships and stuff? Like, what's your feeling on that? Are radio stations using them right? Are there ways to improve that?
Well, yeah, I think just getting the sponsors in on the experiences is one of the best ways to go at it. If you're working with a Trader Joe's or with a Target or I can name a bunch, but I mean, even when we worked with concerts, we made sure there was some kind of an experience for the listener, whether it be sitting in a sound check or going back and eating dinner with the artist or whatever it may be, something that you can offer, and maybe major experiences. We would have artists come and play for 50 of our listeners, prior to the show or something like that. But I think that's something, again, that doesn't cost a lot of money, but you can get sponsors involved in that. And I mean, I still joke with an artist named Jake Owen. We had him playing at a car dealership before his concert. And he thought it was pretty cool because he got to see all these neat cars. But the fact is, the car dealership, they paid into that. And it was a creative thing, and it was an experience for listeners. We invited listeners. We had special tickets that they would get, things like that. But it was an experience for them. They got to meet him, pictures, the whole thing.
Yeah, I know.
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that every salesperson in American radio loves endorsements from their talent, right? They work, and it's part of the experience of the radio station, and it's an investment in the talent. I mean, the smart talent get it, right? They know that they really want to sell that car dealership or that HVAC company. Those guys will pay a premium for them, but it does bring better business, bring more business in.
That's the connection part of it, right? Because you hear the personality talking about how they never had a better experience than when they went to this dealership, and this is what they did for them, and they give you some of the backstory. Oh, I wasn't expecting to have to buy a car, but so you get that engagement, and then they feel like, oh yeah, and they trust these. I know we've talked about this in other articles, and I've read about this in so many different times about the trust of the personalities and really connecting with them that way too. Like, yeah, if she says it, oh, okay, it's good. I'm good. I believe it.
Well, and I think too that because I'm sitting here with the article in front of me because I'm trying to remember what I wrote, and there was one of the things that struck me. I was watching an NFL playoff game, and I saw this little thing that Aaron Andrews, Tom Brady, and Kevin Burkhardt were doing. They were giving away an experience to be in the booth
Mhm.
this coming season, and they were doing it for Erin's, pet charity she loves,
Right.
which I thought was, you get the experience. It's a great cause. It draws people in for that reason, and it was a way for them to connect with their audience. Yeah, it's only one winner, but the fact is, it's an experience. It's some way to create something and show that you care. And again, we have that radio people have the biggest hearts. You see it every Christmas time with all these radio. They spend a lot of time, you know, breaking away from programming, and that's we don't and we don't learn from that the rest of the year. We should take that attitude and carry it through.
There's so many opportunities with it. The local here in Providence, they do something with the dresses, like around prom time, right? And then
Mhm.
they have a fashion show, and one of the personalities on the stations, she gets all dolled up, and then they go down. They have people coming down the runway, and it's like you said, it's a whole experience. And then they're promoting, obviously. Oh, now everybody knows about that dress place, and they're going to go and get their prom dresses there. So
Right.
it's a win, 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 win for so many involved. And obviously, the ultimate goal, like we were talking about, is getting people to listen. Why should they? Here's a reason, right?
Right. And I think and
Absolutely.
just I mean I sit up here in my what I call my palatial closet office every day, and I listen to a radio station. I pick a format and listen for about 3 or 4 hours every day, and I would say 40 to 50% are really decent breaks by a personality. The rest are throwaways. And I think that's where we lose ourselves because we are the personality's in there for 3 hours, and they think sometimes in 3 hours, and we have to understand that every time we open a microphone or play a song, someone else is tuned in, and you got to look at it that way. Steve,
Steve, I feel like you're
Well,
thinking you're something.
well, to take it back to the 3 minute rule, which John mentioned earlier, the one thing that did come out of that I thought was stunning is when Nielsen put the clock up and said that there is no 1 minute in any hour that is more important than any other. That people tune in every single minute. So you can't sit there and say, well, at 13, it's more important than it is at 26. They're all the same. So as a programmer and a talent, to John's point, every time you do something, it matters because someone just tuned in.
Hmm.
and it's
And you
and
don't know when they
it's
did.
not like you're on the air for 10 hours. You're on the air
Yeah.
for 4. Okay, and literally you're working in those 4 hours. When you talk, you're working for maybe an hour total. So put everything you have into it, and I think this starts at the top also. And again, that goes back to culture. If you have the culture that's built to be creative, trusting, and supportive, I think that's going to wind up trickling down and become something. I mean, it's important that the air talent know that every single word they say has got to be something that means something.
No pressure. No pressure, but
None
you're
whatsoever.
right? Yeah, really.
It's the gig.
That's
It is what it
exactly
is.
right.
It's what you signed up for,
That's right.
folks.
That's right.
This has been such an exciting conversation, John and Steve. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I think we hit a lot of really key points here. And John, I will say this, we will definitely love to have you back on.
I would
I
love
know you write articles on the regular, and I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for some new ones. But thank you for sharing the backstory on this article, what inspired you, and for some great conversation with Steve. It was great to have you guys on today. Thanks so much for your time.
I will say this too. Steve's research director did some work for us in Virginia Beach, if I remember correctly. Back,
Yes.
it was really good work because it really turned us around on the digital side. And I think that's what had us, not to put a plug in for you, but I think that's
It's
what really
okay. We'll take it. We'll
that's
take
what
it, John.
but that's what kind of got us rolling in that direction, and it really made a difference over the next couple of years. So
Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
Thanks, John. It was great to meet you, John, to have you on. And like I said, I'm sure we'll circle back later with another article. But until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of your
yes,
day and take care.
thanks.
See you guys.
See you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.